Alright guys, and welcome back. Right, in this series we are building a 2 litre 16 valve ITB Vauxhall Nova. And in this episode we plan to put this 210 horsepower motor in this stunning Mark II Nova shell. But unfortunately, before we can do that, there's a couple of things we need to tackle, such as this horrendously dirty gearbox. Now this is a 30 plus year old F20 gearbox. Now you found these in your Astra GTs, Astra GSIs, Mark IIIs that is, Cavalier GSIs, basically anything with a 2 litre 16 valve red top engine. So these are tried and tested and they're pretty good boxes. However, as they're old, they get very dirty, just like this one. So we're going to clean this up to start off with. So I don't need this mounting bracket. It's different on a Nova. I think this is an Astra one. So that can go. This plate's got to come off. And finally, the earth strap. Right, let's give it a good clean. So as you can see, I brought the gearbox outside. I'm going to use some alloy wheel cleaner on it. This is really good for getting rid of a lot of the crap on the gearbox. We're also going to use a drill and a brush and a bit of a wire brush and just see what we can do with it basically. So we're going to give it a good soaking first. Don't forget your PPE. This alloy wheel cleaner works wonders, but it's very corrosive, so I'm super careful with it. All holes are filled first beforehand to avoid any acid getting inside the gearbox. Once the cleaner's been applied, I go straight on with a rotary brush to loosen some of the debris. Now ideally this needs media blasting to get an as new finish, but this method's the next best thing and something I can do easily at home. Right, I'm going to let that soak in for 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to use the pressure washer with hot water to try and blast as much of it off, and then I'll repeat the process. As you can see, the cartridge works great, but it's still not quite there. So I'll repeat the process. This time I use a wire wheel. This helps to abrade the surface and take away some of the corrosion from the aluminium. I use a couple of different attachments to try and get into every little nook and cranny. Wash it all off again. This time I think it's looking a lot better. Right, so this has had quite a few cleans now. I've gone over the whole thing with a little wire brush and some degreaser. And although it isn't perfect, it's not bad at all. So now I'm just going to give it a dusting of Acid X primer and then a little bit of 5-wheel silver just to give it some colour back, basically. Take your eye off it, because obviously old aluminium, it doesn't look brand new anymore. We want it to. As you can see, I'm trying particularly hard not to get paint on the floor, so I mask up the area first. I took the box on the front so I can get to the underside, and I made sure the box was fully drained beforehand to avoid any leaks. Like a lot of people, I hate working in mess. I give the whole thing a few coats of primer, followed by silver paint and lacquer. Dry between each coat with a heat gun. It really is amazing how much a bit of paint can improve the look of something. So now the gearbox is painted and looking much better. It's 24 hours later, that's nice and dry. Next job on the list is to start just getting a few bits on this engine. So I've just put the Nova charging lube on. So this literally goes from the battery, being a late 1.2 when it goes from the battery, positive and negative. The negative bolts to the block. Earlier Novas go to the gearbox, so it's different. This is a better system, and it goes to the alternator like that. So I've put that on. That's a straight fit. I need to put the crank seal on down here. I've got a new one down there. I need to put the lightweight flywheel on. This is 3.5 kilos rather than 7 kilos. So it's half the weight. It's billet steel. Really nicely made. We've also got a brand new LUK clutch. I've also modified the rear mount. So I've cut these little bits out here so we can fit these brackets and spacers, which will line up with the Cavalier gearbox very nicely. Now on Liam's, I did weld these on. You don't need to weld them on. Most people don't. So I showed you how to do it on Liam's with welding it. This we're going to do it without, just to demonstrate both styles. Obviously it's not as strong in theory, but it will work just as well. So I've just opened the garage up, brought the crane in, and I've taken this off the engine stand. I need to unbolt this now and then fit that rear crank seal. So here's the new crank seal. It's a Victor Rines one, so OE quality, really good. So I've just put a little bit of gasket sealant around the outside, Victor Rines, and I'm just going to carefully tap it in now. Just really carefully wind it in. Take your time. Just like so. And I'm just going to finish it with a nice big drift. Just carefully tap it home. Take your time. Just do a little bit at once. You know when it's all the way in because it'll make a different noise. Can you hear that? Different noise. More kind of high pitched. And clean the gasket glue off a little bit. And hopefully that will seal nicely. So next job is the flywheel. And we've got brand new flywheel bolts from QED. We'll put a little bit of thread lock on each one. And that's that. This is a lot easier to fit than a new style dual mass. I can assure you, a lot lighter. These will only go on one way, so you just got to turn them until everything lines up, which is that. So I've got a special socket which I've ground flat at the end, so it's not got a taper on it. These are such shallow headed bolts. If you don't do that, they can slip really easily. So I'm just going to loosely put them in with the impact gun. Now I'm going to torque them up properly. So they're torqued to 65 Newton meters plus 45 degrees. Right, now that's torqued up, I'm going to fit the new LUK clutch with new clutch bolts. So with these, you can only get them on one way. If you put it on the other way, it won't actually touch properly, it will catch. It does also say Gearbox side as well, or Getriebe Bestie or something like that. That's German, I think, for Gearbox side. Just loosely putting it on, and then I'll line it up. So when I line these up, I don't have the proper tools. What I tend to do is just make sure the disc looks like it's in the centre. So you can see the friction plate there on the pressure plate. Just make sure it's in the same kind of position all the way around, which it is. Nip them up slightly like I have done, and then I can tighten it. Again, tying it in a sequence, and away we go. So I'm going to put this in a slightly unconventional way. I'm going to basically lower the engine in through the top without the gearbox on, just so I've got a little bit more room because I'm by myself. I'm also going to mask off the engine bay and mask off some of the engine just to try and protect it, try not to cause any damage, any scratches, etc. So yeah, once the engine's kind of like put through, I'll slide the gearbox in, bolt it up, and I'll lift it all back in, tighten everything up, and hopefully it'll go in nice and easily. Right, let's drop it down. I'm really careful at this stage. One wrong move could scratch the paint or break something. I lower the engine in stages and I stop regularly to check for clearances, etc. It's definitely doable by yourself, but it's probably advisable to have an assistant if you can. Right, now I just need to hook the gearbox on and put the engine into place. I make it sound easy, don't I? From experience, these engines do not like standing up by themselves, so I'll lower it onto blocks of wood and make sure it's nice and sturdy before sliding the gearbox into place, just to avoid any accidents. The gearbox just pushes on with a bit of effort from me. I then start bolting up the bell housing bolts. Now I can raise it back up and start fitting the mounts. I loosely fit the front gearbox mount. The bolt that clamps through the chassis needs cutting down a bit, but I did this off camera. Once that's in, I bolt up the three 15mm headed bolts into the gearbox. I then move on to the engine mount. Now this is an upgraded 2-litre engine mount brought off eBay. It bolts up using the original Nova M10 15mm headed bolts. The two longer ones go into the rubber part, and then again original Nova nuts and washers hold it onto the chassis. Finally, I jack the back of the gearbox up and fit the modified rear mount using the longer M12 bolts provided. I also put some Loctite on these just to be safe. The floor section then secures with the original Nova bolts and washers. Now that everything's fitted, I make sure all the bolts are tightened and torqued up correctly and remove the jack. And as you can see, the engine is now mounted. It wasn't too bad to do, if I'm honest. A little bit hard by yourself, but yeah, we got there. Still a few bolts I need to tighten up. I need to go check the bell housing bolts and that now, but yeah, we're getting there. So I'm going to demask it, and I think we'll wrap the video up there. So I've been asked a few times how long I spend on these videos, so I thought I'd break it down for you. This is an 11-minute video. I spent 3 hours filming the content and then about 5.5 hours editing. Yeah, that's quite a lot, I know. So that's a total of 8.5 hours. Now, bearing in mind, I work full-time for the NHS and I like to spend as much time with my family as possible. So most of the filming is done between me finishing work and my wife, and then the editing is done of an evening after my son is in bed. Now, I pretty much do this for the love, so if you do enjoy my content, I would massively appreciate your feedback and, of course, subscribing. Anyway, back to the video. So there we go, all demasked, and I think it's looking absolutely fantastic. So if you haven't already, hit the like button, leave a comment below, hit the subscribe button, and stay tuned for next week. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.